First and foremost, I want to just start off with a big welcome to everybody for our 2024 Houston Trends event. Personally, and kind of a little bit of a bias on this, we couldn't be more thrilled to have a full room that we're having here. I think we have over 300 people in attendance for this, and every year it continues to grow. So on behalf of myself, but also on behalf of everybody at Colliers in Houston, thank you for coming out today, and thank you for obviously taking the time to hear what we have to say about the Houston commercial real estate market, but also various trends that we're going to be talking about as well with our artificial intelligence guest speaker. Before I get into the main program today, I actually wanted to introduce myself because I think there's a lot of people in the room that are looking at me going, who the hell is this guy standing up here? We've been used to some other old man up here. Love you, Pat. Just I had to say it. So my name is Danny Rice. For those who have not met me yet, I am the new guy in the room, probably the newest guy in terms of a resident here in Houston, but I'm the new president of Colliers Houston. I'm completely honored to be here, standing here in front of all of you today, representing obviously Colliers. But I will have to say, and I'd be absolutely remiss if I didn't go in a little bit and say that I'm filling some absolutely big shoes with Pat Duffy, 14 years. Let's give a quick round of applause to Pat. So if I mess up, I'm just blaming him because he told me to do it, and then maybe I'll make it better in the years to come. But overall, real quick background on me, just to kind of give a little context for you guys today. I've been in the industry, commercial industry, brokerage industry specifically, for about 18 years, 14 years with Colliers before I moved here back in June of last year. So I'm a whopping 7-8 months here in Houston. I was the market leader and executive managing director for the Central Florida and the West Florida region. So essentially Orlando all the way down Tampa into Fort Myers. Pat and I were talking about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago with his planning, and this opportunity came about. And it really fit in terms of what I personally love to do, working with people, but also working with such a great group at Colliers. So I'm honored to be here. The one thing I wanted to share, and I've said this about 15 times as I've met a lot of new people, is that if you don't realize it, I can say from firsthand that this city is absolutely a special city. When we made this transition 7 months ago, we didn't really know what we were getting into in some ways with the city. I'm born and raised in Florida, didn't know anything better. Candidly, someone told me that Houston is the armpit of the country. That's literally what they said. Why the hell would you want to go there, right? But when we arrived, I'm no kidding, we have had more people introduce us to people in this market, more people take us out to dinners, lunches, coffees, and the word that I keep feeling is how welcoming everybody has been for me, my family, and especially the group at Colliers to essentially make us become Houstonians. And without a doubt, I would say just in that short period of time, we have fallen in love with the city, and we call it home now. So that has a lot to do with all of you in this room that makes this city great. It's not a transient city and tourism like I had in Orlando. You all are here to connect and do what we do right now and obviously make relationships and build and create opportunities together. So without further ado, we'll jump into, obviously, the program today. We've got a lot of stuff we want to cover. We want to try to stay to the script. I want to start with, kind of big picture, introducing or mentioning, let's see if I've got it up. Chrissy, is it going to throw up there all of our partners? I don't think that's going to be up there, but I want to give a quick shout out. Every year, we essentially select and work with a charity partner, and then we have a bunch of different organizations and companies that are local here that are our charity partners and essentially provide funding to help us support a charitable group that we select every single year. So I do want to give a quick shout out to, we've got about 9 different companies that have stepped up and continue to support us in our philanthropic efforts and obviously all of the charity efforts that we do. So Able Design Group, Agile Interiors, Arch Floors, Brown & Brown, Harrison Construction Group, Granite Properties, IAG Business Technology, Lane Property Tax Advocates, O'Donnell Snyder Construction, South Trust Bank, Tuttle Houston, and Wilson Cribbs and Gorn. So let's give a round of applause for all of our sponsors. And so with everything that we do with the sponsors, every year we do a golf tournament that I'm sure many of you have participated in. The golf tournament's goal is to raise money to a select group. And one of the main focuses that we've always done is we want a charitable group that is local. so that we know that the dollars that ends up being raised through the golf tournament and any of the efforts goes straight back into the city, straight back to people that are inside of Houston, and has a direct correlation so that we know we're giving back, and it's not just some large organization that we don't know exactly where the funding is going across the country. We want to partner with a local group. So last year, we were fortunate enough, and thank you to all of our partners, we raised over $55,000 for our charity partner last year, Care Partners, who focused on supporting Alzheimer's patients. So this year, I'm quite excited to announce our new partner, which is the Arbor School, which is a nonprofit organization that offers the most comprehensive special needs education program in Houston for children with a wide range of development delays from 6 weeks old all the way to 18. They strive to educate, empower, and build hope for children with significant special needs. So today, we've got Jilliana, I got it, Jilliana here to give a quick little overview of Arbor School. So let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Danny, and thank you to Colliers for your support and to all the charity partners. Before I get started, I do want to personally thank Neil Potter for bringing our name to the table, and we are so grateful to be your charity partner this year, and I'm elated to share a little bit about what you guys are going to help support. So the Arbor School, as Danny introduced so kindly, has been in Houston for the past 35 years. But for many of those years, you may not have heard of us, because I will say that special needs community parents would understand this, but unless you have special needs, you don't often know what's out in the community until you need it. And we were a one-room little school that served children ages 0 to 3. But those kids came to the school, and most of our children had been told a long list of no's of things that they would not achieve. And when they came to the school, they did learn to walk, they did learn to talk, and they learned to self-feed, and the list goes on. And obviously, as a parent, those parents didn't want to leave. So I always joke that we grew by osmosis. And so now we've grown, and we are thankfully in a brand new campus, and we now serve children through the age of 18. And what was one little room is now 11 classrooms, and it's pretty spectacular. In the very back of this brochure, there's a lovely little ad, if you will, about us. Scan that QR code to learn more, and just know you can personally call me, and I would be elated to take you guys on a tour and to see our work firsthand. So before I wrap up, I was told I have 2 minutes, and I think I've already done a minute. But I do want to just kind of share what's so important to us and what you guys are making possible. So for a school like us that does not exceed a 2-to-1 student-teacher ratio, our work takes a lot of staff. A lot of staff equates to a pretty significant price tag. So the cost of educating one student at our school is $50,000. We do not charge that. We charge 70% of our total costs, and then we apply scholarships on top of that. So that being said, we need to raise this year $1 million just to meet budget. That's not all the extra stuff that we try to do every year, like increase scholarship support and so on. So I want to share one little story, and his name is Daniel. He just started with us last month. His mom called us and said, hey, somebody I know goes to your school. We used to go to school together. Now Daniel is in public school. And she sent us pictures of bruises on his body, the size of my hand, all around his ribs, because Daniel is nonverbal. And Daniel was getting beat up at school, but they couldn't figure out why or who was doing it. And she pulled him out and said, I can't afford to send him to your school, but I need to send him somewhere. And because of events like this, we said, okay, we'll just send Daniel to school on Monday and we'll figure it out, because what we do is we keep stretching, because the Houston community, like you guys, keeps stretching and supporting us philanthropically, and we could not be more grateful. So thank you so much for being here today, and thank you again to the charity partners. It means a whole lot to us, but it means even more to our families. Thank you.
And I think I'll add one more thing for Jilliana. I mean, I think on behalf of all of us, what you all are doing to support, and I'm sure there's people in this room that either know someone and or has it directly correlated with your families, just the time that you all spent on that, I think it goes as just an outstanding efforts from you all. So once again, thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Jilliana. All right, so we're going to go move on to our guest speaker today. I'm going to take a kind of a guess here and say that everybody's heard AI, artificial intelligence, right? I mean, this is not something that's a surprise at this point, but it seems like there's like a significant amount of good feelings, bad feelings, concerns, excitement. What in the heck are we supposed to do with this? What's ChatGPT? And how does it impact, obviously, our daily lives, as well as how does it impact commercial real estate? To me and for all of us, with having Edwin, our guest speaker, and I'm going to introduce him here in a second, there is so much that AI is going to do, not just in the commercial space potentially, not just in the industries we're in, but also in our everyday lives to either enhance it, create efficiencies. I'm a big techie kind of nerd when it comes to a lot of this stuff, so I'm super excited to be announcing our guest speaker for today, Edwin Wong, who's the Senior Vice President in Insights and Innovation over at Vox Media. You probably heard of some of the publication that Vox does. Verge is one of them, and some technology groups. They are what they call the modern media company, which I love. Obviously a little bit changed in terms of how the media is. But they are known best for all of these different brands and technology enablements. And Edwin's role is to really focus on consumer behavior and working with various marketing and advertisement groups to create strategies of how to position it. So he's been in this space for 20 years. And has also held various roles over at BuzzFeed, Pinterest, and Yahoo. So I'm sure you've heard of those three companies before. So without further ado, Edwin, welcome.
Thank you so much. All right. Wonderful. All right. Well, it's great to be in the Houston area and spend some time with you all today. I've been in this role for about 20 years and speaking across the U.S. around this story around AI. And some of my favorite talks have actually been at Google. We presented this work at Apple to a large part of their marketing group, even some leaders at Microsoft. And I found it ironic that those brands in particular were interested in work that I was doing. They were marketers and product builders that literally have built our technological present and are literally building our technological future today. I started to wonder, why would you want to hear from a social psychology major when it comes to AI? And then it dawned on me as I was preparing for this talk, Popular Science they came out with an article and republished it just this last year. And they referred to this psychologist, his name was Frank Rosenblatt. And Frank Rosenblatt loved computers so much that he created this one computer that pretty much patterned itself out of the neural network and taught it to do patterns. And what was so interesting is that the New York Times said that it was a computer that would grow wiser. He called it the Perceptron IBM 401, I believe. And Popular Science said that it was something that continued to learn. In fact, Frank actually said that this computer was sentient. Now, if I told you that this was in 1958, I'm sure it would shock you. And what's interesting is that, yes, we've gone through the AI winter, and in the 90s, we saw it come back. And what's interesting is, as I started to understand why these product builders were interested in what I was talking about, they are building the products. They are building the features and functions. But what is interesting to me is the human journey. It's how we all are going to be grappling with this concept of AI today. And so we broke it into 4 chapters, working with Nilay Patel, who is the editor-in-chief at The Verge, and his staff. And we started to really unpack what's happening. The first chapter is about the AI elephant in the room. We're going to talk about awareness and usage in 2023. We're going to follow up with creators leading the way, because if you ever want to know what's happening in the technological space, just follow the influencer, follow the creator today across all platforms. We're going to take a page out of Clay Christensen's Jobs to be Done. It's wordplay, as you will see, because AI is going to impact us first in our jobs. And close with writing the rules around accountability when it comes to AI. Now, the AI elephant in the room, I'm sure most of you know that the consumer is definitely paying attention to AI. Many of you all are. Just open up your phones, go to LinkedIn. Every single seller is probably telling you, please buy this product. it has AI in it. Whether it does or not, we don't know. And what's interesting is that as a psychology major, I think that AI is going through what I call semantic satiation. It's what happens, it's a psychological phenomenon. When we say something over and over and over again, it starts to mean absolutely nothing. So what's critical today is what is the specificity of AI when it comes to our products that we're building, when it comes to our marketing. What is our point of view, and how are we going to really think about this in the very near future? And it makes us very suspect at The Verge. We cover technology. If you don't read it today, please do. It's one of the best technology brands out there when it comes to digital media. And we've gone through tons and tons of hype cycles, whether it's the blockchain, the Internet of Things, the rolling 3D TVs that we were seeing from LG last year, chatbots, even cloud computing, and that word 5G. We've seen it all. But what's interesting is when you contextualize AI back to some of the things that are happening, it's quite a bit different. The consumer, 74% of them, says that it's going to have as big of an impact as electric vehicles. It's going to have a bigger impact than virtual reality, like the metaverse or even AR. It has twice the impact as NFTs. And so for all you all who bought Bored Apes, I'm so sorry to tell you that's so 2021, and The Verge would have told you so. Now, when we started our journey, about a third of consumers, 33%, in July, literally said that they had tried a ChatGPT tool. Now, you are the first in this room to see our most updated data, which we actually collected in October. So back then, that represented about 88 million individuals or Americans over the age of 18 plus. And what's interesting about that is we felt really comfortable with that number because even OpenAI was talking about 100 million global users at the time. Now, this 7-point shift tells you that we are only seeing that growth more and more. And things have escalated quite quickly, haven't they? About half of you all are probably, 52%, seeing AI across all of the things that you read digitally, listening to podcasts, on social media like TikTok and Instagram. And I actually call it what the 4 I's. We started in February with the introduction when Microsoft said, hey, we are going to start working with this small little company called OpenAI and including what they do from ChatGPT into what we are going to do. In March, it came down to ingenuity. We saw things like the blinged out Pope, as you can see. In the summer, I would actually talk about this notion of implementation. If you are a Secret Invasion fan and you watch Disney+, Disney was starting to implement some of the things within their work, but not really talking about it and getting in trouble with creators and people who actually work on the shows. And in December, the last thing I would talk about is infighting. The last I, we actually saw the explosion of what happened around OpenAI and Microsoft. Hopefully all things are patched up, but you're starting to see a plethora of things happening in the space, and there's a lot more to define and a lot more to go. Now, when we talk about that user base of 88 million, I don't think it's a surprise that it's being led by millennials and Gen Z. Scott Galloway, who has his Pivot podcast with Kara Swisher, talked about how in his feed he constantly sees Gen Z and millennials fill his feed with a bunch of AI hacks. What's interesting, though, isn't the fact that young people are leading technology. It's the fact that if we don't study generative AI and understand its properties, we are not going to understand digital experiences, especially in an age of responsive design and connection that is completely new. So how are we going to think through some of those things as marketers, as product builders, as realtors, et cetera? And we've reached the cultural zeitgeist. 61% of Gen Z say they discuss AI multiple times a week. I knew AI was a thing when, and I love my mom, my 80-year-old mom came up to me one day when we were having dinner and said, oh, so I was on my Facebook and I saw this thing about AI. Do you know anything about that? Now, I love her so much, but this is a woman who can't find her clock or her maps on her iPhone. And this kind of tells you that AI has made its way into all of our lives. Now, we also know that AI is a hot topic of conversation on even things like podcasts that have nothing to do with AI. Conan O'Brien literally spent a number of minutes, 23 minutes, with Patton Oswalt, who was a comedian, talking about how AI would ultimately impact Hollywood during the strike. And that actually was the last tipping point and thing they needed to nip in the bud before they even closed out the strike. And what was so interesting is that a couple weeks ago, he finished off that conversation by talking to another famous star, Mel Brooks of Spaceballs, about AI. It is definitely making its way into that cultural zeitgeist and into all of our conversations. Now, this data would suggest that there's plenty of opportunity. When you think about brands in the AI space, especially in the generative AI space, we know that ChatGPT and OpenAI might actually have the highest brand awareness and usage at 57%, but focus on the yellow. It's not about Gemini, it's not about Copilot. There's plenty of opportunity to go around. In some of the new data that we actually collected, what's interesting is that as we move out of that early influencer cycle, we're actually seeing the larger brands grow in brand awareness, but the smaller brands like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney shrink. That's very normal and very interesting to keep tabs on if you guys are investors in some of these generative models. Now, consider this. Think about the last platform that ultimately impacted your life. In 2008, it was this device, the iPhone, where 1.4 million products shipped. Now multiply that times what? 100. Over 100 million people in the US alone have started to use these products. And AI is here to stay. So having that clear understanding in the first chapter is absolutely critical. And understanding the brands and the things it can do will be critically important. As I start with chapter 2, why am I talking about the creators? Well, if you listen to insider intelligence, marketers will spend approximately $7 billion on the creator economy. According to Goldman Sachs, the creator economy will actually impact about $480 billion in the US. Don't know how they come up with that calculation. It's a lot of money. And what's interesting about the creators is if you think about who they are, they're usually the first to engage with some of the newest platforms. Last year, before I did the study, I had a chance to work with folks at the United Talent Agency where we created work and put framework around the metaverse. People like Travis Scott, Paris Hilton, franchises like Fashion Week started to take advantage of the metaverse. But think about the metaverse as a platform. You quite literally need stacks and stacks of programmers. You need hundreds, if not millions of dollars of a brand to actually engage. You need platforms to want you on their platform to begin with. And quite frankly, you're not even working with the top 1% of influencers. You're working with the top 0.0001% of influencers. But when you think about AI, this literally is a part of the daily rhythm of every single creator and the way they create on a daily basis. And it's practically free. And for The Verge, why this was so exciting is that it becomes the perfect intersection of people, platform, and tools. And so when you look at what creators were actually doing in the space and what was being created, this was from Midjourney at the beginning of the year or at the end of 2022. The artwork was a little gimmicky, wasn't exactly something that I'd want to look at. Fast forward about 8 months, we're talking about synthetic models. We're talking about influencers that aren't even real anymore. If you guys love AI or love learning about it, there's a really fantastic newsletter called Superhuman that covers a lot of AI products. What's interesting is at the end, there's always a creative section where they literally will challenge someone like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion to come up with Wes Anderson's intersection with Marvel Comics. The pictures are hilarious. It's really fascinating. And if you are on LinkedIn, Midjourney literally looked at the life cycle of what Spider-Man looked like from last year to this year, and it is remarkable. And if you think about it, AI has been around for quite some time. I was talking to Chrissy when we were talking about doing this talk, and if you think about it, it's the 41st anniversary of the Machine Learning Conference. The DeepMind actually beat the best Go player about a decade ago. But what's interesting is that right now, this feels very human and personal because a normal human like Edwin Wong can literally pick up a device and start using AI. Of the 91% of people that actually did something when it comes to generative AI, it started off with answering a question. And we went into brainstorming very quickly, and it fast followed into creating things, whether it was artwork, music, even emails. This is the power of AI today. I want to ask you, does anyone in the room listen to Spotify? I sure hope most of you. What about any fans of Drake and The Weeknd? I expected the whole room to raise their hands. Now, if you were a fan of Drake and The Weeknd during a hot spring weekend, you would remember that Heart on My Sleeve actually launched on Spotify. It was the rage for that weekend, and it garnered millions and millions of listens. Only it wasn't Drake and The Weeknd. It was a young teen who thought, why don't I use some of this generative AI, mix the two together, and put it out there. In fact, this young fella who got his song pulled decided to actually apply his song for a Grammy. The fact that he didn't write it means he can't win. But this sort of tells you where we're at in the space. Through Magenta or Beatbot, which are music generative AI tools, you quite literally can combine SpongeBob SquarePants with your favorite Taylor Swift song today. Fascinating, but scary at the same time. This is another example. This is Becca Versace. She is a creator for The Verge. She has a fantastic YouTube segment called Full Frame. She's not an animator. She's not an illustrator. She's literally a video editor that does incredible things around technology. And she was doing a quick tutorial on Gen 2 Kyber Synthesia. This is what she created. And this kind of tells you what can happen with an afternoon of playing with some of this generative AI technology. And this represents some of my favorite slides when it comes to data. AI is literally making my work better. About 50% say that whether it's an essay, artwork, email coding, it doesn't matter. I'm getting better and better when it comes to how I might actually use it amongst those that do use it. It probably doesn't impact world-class illustrators or world-class photographers. It's the common person like myself that could actually use it to become better. And if you don't believe me, you literally can get on Wix as an example, answer about 6 questions, and in 20 seconds, it will now generate a website for you. Now, as a result of that, we're starting to see service journalism. We are all trying to learn how to prompt engineer, and if you go on any TikTok, you see someone like Danny Sork, who is from Utah, and she's a photojournalist who captures people's weddings. And you can see she is actually reviewing Firefly, which is an Adobe product. You see that yellow curve that will keep coming up? Well, quite literally, just by circling it and using generative AI, it literally cleans up that photo in a flash. This is what's happening in the space today. And it tells you that young people are learning these tools organically. Now, it brings us to an interesting question. Who owns the data? What's fascinating to me is that when you talk to a consumer and say, well, what do you want to do with generative AI? The first thing they say is, I want to copy the style of an artist. I want their song, I want their artwork, I want something about them, and I want to make something of my own. Yet, on the other side, 43% would say, but if you copy, you should be banned. This is completely wrong. We need to actually pay for artists' work. Austin Kleon wrote this amazing book in 2012 that my wife, who is an illustrator, talked to me about called Steal Like an Artist. And he talked about how all art is derivative of someone else's artwork. I don't think this is what he meant when he actually wrote that book. And what's interesting is that this all came to a head over a 7-day period on TikTok when independent book writers were literally praising ChatGPT and OpenAI, saying, if you upload all of your work, what's fantastic is that OpenAI can help you with summarizing your book, giving you new endings. Around day 4 or 5, they started to realize that did we just upload all of our work and disenfranchise ourselves because generative AI was training itself off of that work to make us all better writers? Who owns the IP? Hopefully the New York Times and OpenAI will help us decide that for all of us. That question of IP is going to be critical. So as we close out, these are some examples of when publishers are getting it wrong all across. Now, for those of you who read MSN, I'm sure you saw that really sad article of Brandon Hunter, who was an NBA star. He died rather young at 42 from a heart attack. And because of generative AI and the usage of that, it described him as useless, which is absolutely terrible. But this is what happens when there are no humans involved and we allow the computers to take over to generate stories. So consider this. The internet has lowered the barriers for information and democratized all of that for us. What generative AI is going to lower the barriers for is skill. Edwin doesn't need to know how to illustrate. Edwin doesn't need to know how to do anything. Generative AI will actually help me with that. But with unfettered access to all of these tools comes the unfettered backlash cycles. So as we start to think about who we are disenfranchising and how that actually works in the things we are going to be building for the community, we have to ask those questions when it comes to the creators. Now, chapter 3 is about jobs to be done, and Clay Christensen wrote this amazing book about thinking about the jobs to be done when it comes to a product. Now, obviously, we played with that because not only do you need to be thinking about those things, but AI will ultimately be impacting us at work first. In fact, 2/3 of users are finding AI to be useful at work. The monetization models are still a little bit difficult. If you're not NVIDIA or AMD, you're probably not making too much money. OpenAI is certainly making about $200 million in revenue. But even if you've been reading some of the tech trades, Anthropic and OpenAI, they talk about how expensive it is to actually train these large language models. We have a long way to go when it comes to how we might actually think about monetization and how we build for that. And quite frankly, when it comes to how it's going to impact us at work, it's going to be about productivity and quality first. But what I love is it's going to help to generate and brainstorm new revenue streams and give us new ideas and really supercharge how we might actually think about AI in the future for our businesses. And nearly half of Americans, they know that AI will disrupt the workforce. If you have seen the recent study by McKinsey, Lorena Yee, senior partner, said that AI will give us all superpowers. I'm not sure I would go that far, but I'm very bullish like she is, and I know that that is going to be true. However, of those that have not used AI tools, half aren't quite sure how or whether they will. And if you've been following VentureBeat and the Wall Street Journal, you would know that the more we actually train some of these models, the less effective they actually are. In fact, when it comes to math problems, it's 40% less effective. If you read The Atlantic, the CEO, quite literally, of The Atlantic, did a demonstration of pretty simple multiplication. It was like 12,100 times 12,200. Generative AI actually got that wrong. Which tells you, because it uses a different algorithm than calculators, that we all are actually not that great at math. And so those are some of the things that we actually need to pay attention to as we think about training data. Now, in the future, how helpful would some of these things be? Danny actually asked me to talk about the future at work. What you see here is quite simple. Break it into 3 chunks. It's literally on the left side, stuff that I can't do. In the middle are things that I don't want to do, and then there's email, which is also things that I don't want to do. And what I think this slide tells you is that the consumer or the worker is actually looking for us to create utility first, productivity first. And in fact, as we actually see older consumers move into the generative AI space, productivity trumps creativity, which was a surprise for me. And this goes back to some work that you saw earlier, or some stats that you saw earlier. Email is actually second now to what people are using when it comes to generative AI. How do we think about email? It is one of the things that we can actually operationalize and optimize because we all hate writing it, and sometimes we all don't really like reading it as well. Now, what about personalization when it comes to how we would find it useful? What's interesting is that, again, it's all about customer service and subject matter expertise. When it comes to giving away all of your data so that you have the ultimate AI experience, that's actually less important than the responsiveness of that actual bot at the current moment. And what's interesting is that when I think about what's happening in the space, I've been studying the mobile space. It started at Yahoo. And this notion of responsive design, when the mobile device became a thing, is how websites went from the PC to the mobile. And what we thought about was the hardware. What generative AI is quite literally responsive design, but it's not about the hardware, it's literally about the software and the way we engage with the digital experience like we're having a conversation. We need to think through that paradigm shift as we are building our own products and apps for the future. Now, thinking outside the box, you could see that we're starting to see generative AI being used in health. Medical analysis is actually something we're super excited about if we can get things right. StarCraft, you can see here, DeepMind is now better than almost 99.8% of any StarCraft player. And Amaranth is an influencer who decided to build a bot of herself, rent it out to people for $25 to be a virtual girlfriend. And in fact, Tim Wong is the CEO of Fiscal Note and has been able to train generative AI on laws, quite literally disenfranchising a lot of paralegals because it makes writing laws a lot quicker. And this is really all about what it's about. It's about unrealized potential, productivity, creativity, and curiosity. And I joke about this all the time. I've been in this space for about 25 years, not 20. I feel a little old. And at the beginning of my career, I worked with Microsoft during the launch of Windows XP. If I'm in a tech room, usually I get a lot of groans, even from the Microsoft people. But what's interesting is that the tagline at the time was realizing your potential. That is where we're at today. How are we going to be doing that for the end worker? And there's nowhere else where we're going to see some unrealized potential than in search. That is literally going to be the next big disrupted space. It's a very big space that I'm sure Google and Microsoft are thinking about, because quite literally, it's not just TikTok that is becoming a new search engine. 61% of Gen Zs and 53% of millennials said that they started to use AI tools in search. So Perplexity AI, Arc, those are new experiences, Copilot, that we need to think about as we are thinking about marketing as well. But what about hallucinations? This is a nice word that technology or technologists have actually come up to say, sometimes generative AI might lie to you. They might not be telling the truth. And quite frankly, if it's 30% wrong, it's not a problem because we can sniff it out. What happens when we get down to 1 to 2% wrong? How is that going to impact how we think about misinformation and all the things that are going to be critically important to actually combat hallucinations? And here are some articles that The Verge actually wrote about when CNET found errors in almost half of its AI-written stories. The very first introduction of Bard, there was actually a mistake. These are some of the things that we are dealing with when it comes to hallucinations and why this is going to be a very important watched space. Now, I wanted to show you that for your business in particular, if you think about SEO, search engine marketing, search engine optimization, any of your marketing that actually creates a good distribution flow to your website or to your products, it will be disrupted. This is an example of what it's going to look like. And so how, at Collier, are you going to think about being the ultimate brand for your customer? And how do you reevaluate platforms that you used to think served you in delivering you traffic? Think about it. In the publishing space, as soon as there was a switch in an algorithm on one of the platforms, it literally disenfranchised some of the companies that I worked at in my past. And in the same way, the KPI for search engines is to get you, the user, off of their platform as soon as possible so that they can charge you a search. In the future, generative AI fundamentally flips that KPI. As Google, as Microsoft, as any other search engine, it is my incentive to keep the consumer on the search engine as long as possible to close the deal and monetize then. How does that disenfranchise you? And how do you, as sellers for Collier, really start to think about your brand being the ultimate place for the consumer or for the people you serve? Consider this. These tools are ubiquitous. They are going to be changing when it comes to the jobs that we are doing. and they will quite literally reset the internet. How are we going to think about it for users? How are we going to think about how it fundamentally changes the things that we are using when it comes to distribution and marketing? Now, as I close out on the 4th chapter, writing the new rules, what makes AI different from anything else is when you think about the internet from 25 years ago, social media, even the metaverse, we all have a framework as a consumer of how this is going to work, and even things like data privacy or the extraction of data. So the consumer is not going into this experience with eyes wide closed, or eyes wide open, not eyes closed. And so it's not about writing the rules at all. It's really about thoughtfulness to the consumer. Quite frankly, 69% believe that AI will upend society, but 62% aren't quite sure exactly how. But they do know that the actual impact is going to be profound. In fact, 55%, they understand that the tools are going to be used in this next presidential election. In fact, the first example of that happened just last week as someone deepfaked Joe Biden's voice in a robocall. We're going to see a lot more over the next 6 to 9 months. Now, as a result, consumers actually want action. What they're looking for is that top number, 76%. They want the government to act. And sometimes our government doesn't act as quickly as we want them to. The EU essentially moved a lot quicker than we did, but over the past 9 months or so, we are actually seeing some very good action. President Biden asked some of the largest companies to sign decrees that they would actually responsibly work in AI. The AR guardrails, which is a couple hundred pages, just came out, and it was something that I think was worked on with lawmakers, and so hopefully we'll start to see some more regulation when it comes to how we think about AI and how it gets implemented into the products that we see on a daily basis. The second and third points are quite interesting. Now, I want you to focus on this concept of AI models that are fact-based. Now, consider that you're walking through Washington, D.C. You put on the new Apple Vision Pro or any other goggle experience, and you look at the Capitol and you say, Vision Pro, please tell me through generative AI what happened on January 6th. On one side of the equation, it was a sedition where people were trying to upend an election. On the other, it is disenfranchised people who are protesting corrupt government. I am not here to discuss politics today. What I'm saying is that what is fact, what is misinformation will take a lot of work and will take the populace to decide. And in fact, on the Pivot podcast, the last time this actually happened, where it took hundreds of years, education and systems to really retrain ourselves, was the invention of the printing press. This is where we're at today when it comes to AI and the seriousness that we must have when we engage with these products. Now I'm going to be a little bit more lighthearted with the third point. Any of you in this room play World of Warcraft? Please, just tell me one, at least one. Thank you, right there. Now, on a Reddit feed, there was a group of people who loved Warcraft, and they would talk about it, and they were finding that there was an AI bot that would scrape all of that engagement, put it up as content on a publishing page, and literally grift off of their ideas through the use of digital advertising. So they were making money off of someone else's IP, essentially. These folks actually figured it out. So they got on a Discord and said, let's have some fun with this AI bot. And they invented a character called Glorbo. Glorbo doesn't exist, but Glorbo was all they were so excited about for a week and a half. Not a surprise, a week and a half later, on this amazing World of Warcraft site, it talked about how excited they were about the new release of the character Glorbo. And this sort of tells you how, when it comes to AI-created content, you need to be pretty careful and state that it is being created by AI. Now, deepfakes and things of that nature, I'm sure many of us are fearful of deepfakes. I'm sure many of us have also heard what happened to someone as famous as Taylor Swift on X, even in the last week. Absolutely horrible. And let's talk about something as horrible as revenge porn. What's really interesting about the legal argument around revenge porn is right now it is being legislated by this concept of copyright. If there is a need to make a copy of something like that in the space, you can stop someone because you are literally infringing on that copyright. You are making copies of the original. What happens when we get to a space where deepfakes actually removes the copy because the copy is actually the original? This is what we are talking about when we talk about the legal system and why it is so complicated right now when it comes to AI. There is a lot to be legislated. There's a lot of rules that we're going to need in order to make this work, especially when it comes to deepfakes. And so as a result of that, we are a bit anxious when it comes to AI's impact on society. You could see that anxious plus both is a little bit higher. And when it comes to our personal lives, we're also more worried, probably because of all of the implications that we are going to see. Now, I talk about this slide because I think it's important. As marketers, there are the new 3 Ps when it comes to AI. While we're a bit pessimistic, it's a bit out there that we think that AI could actually destroy all of society, we understand the practical value of it. It's going to be a great force of economic empowerment, and we understand it's a paradigm shift. This is the dance of the conundrum that every marketer will need to face when they think about AI and how to message it. And what the consumer is expecting from each of you in companies is the amount of misinformation that could actually occur because of our inclusion of AI within our experiences. And quite frankly, we also care about consumers. We care about the fact that AI could actually hurt the derivatives of people that we work with. In fact, I had a great conversation with Patsy just earlier today before this talk, and she talked about how AI might disenfranchise people who we want to help the most, who are actually entering into the workforce. How do we actually create jobs for them? And for any of you who work in ESG, think about it this way. If you all have ESG goals, did you know that every time you do between 5 to 15 generative AI searches, depending on the complexity, you quite literally need to take a 16-ounce bottle of water and pour it on the server to cool it down. Microsoft, because of its use and connection to AI, literally used 2,500 more Olympic-sized pools of water last year just because they needed to cool servers down. That's 600,000 gallons of water. That's like turning a hose on at full blast for 130 years just to fill up that pool. How many more large language models, how many more generative AI searches are we going to be doing? Are we thinking about those things for our children? And who is actually asking these questions when it comes to our involvement? Now let's get to something a little lighter. What about privacy and things of that nature? Are we willing to give away our data for better AI experiences? Well, crabby Gen Xers like myself and those older are not so happy about that, but younger consumers are actually a bit more open. Jensen Huang, I should say, the CEO of NVIDIA, talks about the digital twin, but who actually owns that data? It's an open question and an open minefield. And I'm going to close with this fun slide. This is about sentience. We're expecting that AI is going to reach this place at some point. But before we even get to sentience, what's interesting is that more than 50% of us believe that we are going to have a relationship, a personal relationship with AI, and 35% of us, if we're lonely enough, will actually have that relationship with AI personally. This is actually a slide that is an ode to Her, or the movie Her. If you don't notice, that's Thomas. As I close, what's interesting is that what I hope these 4 chapters gave you is a construct to understanding usage around AI products today, the elephant in the room that we're all talking about. Creators, if you study them, you will understand where we're headed next. Jobs to be done. It's going to impact us in our jobs first, but what is that job that we're wanting AI to essentially impact? And most importantly, when it comes to this section, the big takeaway is don't take the consumer savviness for granted. When it comes to this new tech, embrace transparency, embrace disclosure, embrace your user, and please be thoughtful. Thank you so much for your time.
So we do have a quick tech change, so we're going to take 2 seconds if anybody has a question for Edwin before we wrap up. We got one question over here. Say it loud.
Yeah, well, you talked about the water cooling, but obviously Texas energy and power generation is pretty important.
that is also the case. And so it's not even just the water usage, but the power that is going to be necessary. And so one of the things that I can actually see happening in the space is going to be a different way to think about large language models. We're starting to see some of those things as I'm reading more about it in terms of mini models and things of that nature. So you break off the models and you're not using as much energy. But this is an important point for all of us to start to think about. What does responsibility look like? No one is asking those questions. We actually need to start asking those questions. And again, the last time we actually saw a fundamental platform shift like this that literally took hundreds of years to change over was the invention of the printing press. If we are at this moment, we need to start asking some pretty hard questions to make sure we're doing this responsibly.
Any other questions? One more, and we'll continue on.
A 100% the right question. The more synthetic data, the more C+ content. It's similar to if you are going to train your model off of things that aren't great, what comes out? Trash in, trash out. One of the things that I think we all have to start asking ourselves is what comprises some of these large language models from some of the companies that are out there, and what's in it. That's critically important. Some of the models that are quite literally leveraging our social experiences, social media experiences as an example, is that a reflection of life? Is that how we actually want to engage those models when it comes to our own experiences that we're building for the consumer? These are all legitimate and really incredibly important questions that we should be asking before you engage in any of the models that you'll be building your bots and your experiences off of. Thank you very much,
Let's give another
guys.
round of applause for Edwin. All right, so here's the cool part and the bad part. The good part is we do have drinks after this. The bad part is I'm like the one holding you up from getting more drinks. So I'm going to go through. We've got a bunch of different slides. I'm going to try to go through it quick. I do speak pretty fast, so hopefully that'll get us through. But we do have a quick video that we're going to start with. So let's get this rolling here. We're going to start with single-family housing. Obviously at Colliers, we're not selling homes at the end of the day, but from the standpoint of what is happening in the single-family market, it still does obviously impact everything that happens with retail, happens with office, and just overall population growth. And so when we looked at, we kind of got some data from our friends over at HAR. Big picture, you guys have all probably seen this already in terms of how the residential market has been faring here in Houston. And really the big underlying kind of topic here is sale volume is obviously down. So we've seen transaction volume drop, and that's really merely because of the lack of supply that is on the market in terms of sellers that are out there putting their properties up on the market. And it has a lot, and you're going to hear me saying this probably throughout this entire quick update on the Houston market, it has a lot to do with interest rates. The past 12 months, we've all felt it. All the consumers have felt interest rates rising. So if you're a seller, there is no world that you want to get into going from a 2.5% interest rate to a 7% interest rate if you don't have to, right? So from a transaction volume standpoint, we've seen obviously over the past 12 months the dip, but overall pricing has stayed about the same. There's still enough demand out there that when a product or when a house goes on the market, it's obviously getting the activity, and it is maintaining the pricing at the component that we've launched. I did this quick little numbers. If you bought a house back in 2021 at the price that we are today, so average sale price of $412,000. If you bought a house back in 2021 when we were at the lowest of interest rates, which was 2.6%, that would have cost you roughly a principal and interest about $1,600 a month, $1,650 give or take. Today, at the current interest rates that are at 6.7, your buying power is a $260,000 home, right? So that same, if you want to keep that same monthly income. So either one, you're going to have to come significantly out of pocket for that, or two, you're going to have to go into another home. So obviously you take those factors into place. Why would you sell? Why would you move if you're not going to be able to upgrade your house unless you're spending more money? So from our forecast, land sites, the developers, the D.R. Hortons of the world, Pulte, they are active. They are still building. They're buying the tracts of land. And we suspect that for the next 12 months, 24 months, as interest rates start to become more favorable, is what we continue here. That's going to continue to make, obviously, the single-family market, which impacts everything else that I'll talk about here today. Shifting over to migration. So you all have seen from the overall standpoint of population growth happening into the state of Texas, well, there's nothing better than to say that Texas is number one. Obviously, everything's bigger in Texas, and we continue to be at the top. So Texas, once again, from one wave moves, ranked at the number one spot for the 6 out of the past 8 years in terms of overall population growth that we have with everybody coming here. Biggest mover from was the state of California. There's 105,000 people that moved over here. Here's the good part. Average household income of those people coming, $150,000 a year annual household income coming. So that's bringing more money into the state, which is bringing more activity, which is bringing positivity. And all of this encompassed together is essentially giving that insulation a little bit better of any economic headwinds that we've been hearing about, that we've been seeing, and the challenges that you're going to hear me talk about when I talk about investments here in a little bit. This is keeping us a little bit more insulated because of that population growth and the migration that people want to be in the state of Texas. That same population growth shifting over to retail is frankly making retail just be absolutely on fire. I should have put just a big old flame on this slide, frankly. Of all of the asset types, retail is just blowing and going. And it's quite funny, in my opinion, and ironic. When the pandemic happened, we all remember, we all got locked into our houses. We couldn't go out to retail. Retail got a swift kick in the you-know-what. But as soon as the handcuffs got taken, all of us from the government off, what did we want to do? We wanted to go back out. We wanted to experience, obviously, the retail social side of it. We wanted to be with our friends. We wanted to go enjoy our time again. And retail has gone from what we thought was going to be a devastation in retail to now the most active and most consistent market that is out there. Vacancy sitting at 6.5%. We're down about 20 basis points on a year-over-year basis. And again, there's just not enough supply, frankly, for the demand on retail space that we're seeing in terms of the Houston market. That kind of is the same across a lot of the country as well, but there's a big focus around retailers wanting to continue to grow in here, and that absorption has obviously helped on that standpoint too. The retail construction side, it is obviously less. Cost of capital, cost of getting a loan to go do new construction is not very favorable. So that whole supply issue that we're having in terms of retail spaces is seen here. So where there's only 650,000 square feet of retail product under construction right now. For the size of what the Houston market is, you would expect to see more than that. But overall, 655,000. The one that I think is, who's heard of Meow Wolf? Who's been to Meow Wolf? Okay. So if you haven't been to Meow Wolf, you need to Google it, first of all. Depending on if you're into maybe non-legal activities in terms of, what people do in Colorado do, you might want to do that beforehand because it's trippy. It is a very odd experience. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that if that's what you do, that's your choice, not my choice. But big picture, we went to the one in Colorado. It is kind of exciting having that obviously come here, but it is a very unique experience, and I would love to hear how you all feel once you obviously get to experience that as well. Am I right? Right? Okay, good. But overall construction activity probably not going to change substantially in terms of that because of, again, the cost of capital. But we do need more retail. Restaurants are blowing and going and continue to grow. And I think from that standpoint, we love it. Here's the one good thing that I'm going to talk about today in terms of overall investments. Big picture, the interest rate market, the cost of capital, like I've said, has put a major dent in overall investments when you look at it just kind of holistically. Retail, on the other side, though, is the only asset type of all the asset types that actually showed an increase in number of transactions year over year. So last year, in 2023, we had, roughly speaking, 245 transactions of retail properties that closed. In 2022, it was about 230. So there was a 6% growth in retail investments that happened year over year here in Houston, whereas the rest of the country averaged a drop of 15% in terms of number of transactions. So retail, again, going back to it's on fire. It's on fire from leasing standpoint. It's also very positive in terms of investments. Lenders also are back happy to lend on a retail space. It's not necessarily they're just giving money away because it's a tight lending market, but 2 or 3 years ago, retail, nobody wanted to touch that. Nobody wanted to give money for retail because we didn't expect it to be coming out as much as it has. So overall, median price per square foot, you can see that there, $271 a square foot in terms of Houston, and then $258. And then on the cap rate side, no surprise, cap rates are going up a little bit as well, but again, trending just a little bit above the overall U.S. Shifting over to multifamily, it's been a big shift on that one. I'm going to shorten up a little bit on multifamily just for the sake of time today. When we think about multifamily, to me, it's been a little bit of tale of two stories almost. So if you look at multifamily on the leasing side of it, it's actually not been that bad. It's a little bit stable is probably the right way to put it. Overall vacancy and occupancy has pretty much stabilized. We still have increases in lease rates in some pockets. Actually, Class A lease rates are kind of dropping right now. But there's been a lot of supply that has come to the market, but generally speaking, has been absorbed pretty well. Again, going back to the migration, people coming in, we're absorbing a lot of that product. On the negative side, right, on the challenge side, we have seen a drop in number of transactions for multifamily properties for Houston on a year-over-year basis by 70%. That's a massive drop, obviously, in overall transactions for multifamily. The overall U.S. average actually only dropped 54%. I say only, that's still horrible, right? But from an activity standpoint, Houston got a little bit more of the impact for multifamily investments than the rest of the country, dropping, again, at 70% from the 50% of the overall. I think kind of looking forward for us in terms of predictions and forecasts, with interest rates predicting probably sometime in the second half of this year starting to trend down depending on what tomorrow's meeting and the outcome of the Feds decide and what the next couple of meetings look like. We're going to be in this kind of bumpy little world, but there's definitely been a flurry of new people that are interested. Maybe they're not necessarily interested in investing into multifamily in the same way maybe 2-3 years ago. They're now a little blood in the water. They're predicting or thinking. There's some risks that are on some of these properties. Is there opportunistic buyers to come in? That's some of the changes that we're starting to see. But overall, multifamily, even though it's been challenged, is still going to be challenged on the investment side, but leasing is still good. Houston population growth is still going to be positive, and we're going to continue to have the same kind of feel that we've had over the past 12 months. Construction activity, this one overall for me, if you look at it and you start to kind of compare Q4 of 23 versus Q4 of 22, really all this says is we have more units delivered in 23, we have more units under construction in 23, and we have more units proposed in 23. So developers are very content and very still positive in terms of what the multifamily space in Houston is. And so I think from the long-term standpoint, if you're in the long-term business, overall it's still going to be a very positive look in terms of multifamily construction and development. I already kind of touched on the multifamily investment side, but just from a quick number standpoint, cap rates on the right-hand side, and then again, the median price per unit on the left-hand side, typically trend always a little bit below the rest of the country, sitting at roughly 116,000 per unit here. And then cap rates as well. I mean, multifamily has been hit not only with the cost of capital, but the insurance premiums have skyrocketed as well. So you've kind of got this trifecta of buyers not wanting to buy necessarily. You've got sellers not wanting to sell because it doesn't make sense. You got insurance against you. You got cost of capital. So there's been a lot of challenge around multifamily investments, which obviously goes into those stats with 70% drop in transactions. Office properties. I strategically did like the good, the kind of good. Now it's getting a little bit worse. And we'll bounce back to industrial and then healthcare at the end. Office is one that I think is getting a bad rap, though. And I'll tell you why here in a second. But big picture for office, I'm actually ecstatic to share that this year, 2023, the Houston office market showed positive absorption. Nobody would have probably guessed that. And with all the headlines that you're hearing and all the conversation you're hearing, you would expect that vacancy should be skyrocketing up because everybody wants to work at home, nobody wants to come into the office, and every business should be shrinking, right? But overall, Houston still performed fairly well given all of the obstacles and still had positive absorption for the year. There we go. Sublease space as well, that skyrocketed right after the pandemic, is starting to come down, so we're seeing the activity there. And then big picture, lots of different activities. Now, here's the one thing that I think and why I said it's getting the bad rap. There was someone in the room sent me an article recently, about 2 days ago, I think it was, that talked about, I think the headline said something along the lines of, there's a huge glut of office space potentially coming back to the market. There's 800 million square feet of office space that has a lease expiration in the next 5 years. No duh. Every tenant has a lease expiration almost in the next 5 years, right? That's not really that important of a topic, but it sensationalizes it to make it feel like there's 800 million square feet of potential space that could be vacated. Here's the reality of those types of contexts, and I always believe in having context to compare against because it doesn't really have any story unless you think about it. There's 8 billion square feet of office space across the US. So even, let's just say in the worst case scenario, 800 million square feet vacated over the next 5 years. That's only 10% of the market that we're talking about that has that potential impact. The reality is, and many of you are business owners in this room, I don't think one of you are sitting there going, yeah, I'm just going to completely vacate my office in this next renewal, right? If your business is doing well, which most businesses are doing well, we're paying rent, everything's going, generally speaking, good, you're going to end up renewing, or you might shrink a little bit, or you're going to expand. And so what we've seen in some of the trends is, yes, there is obviously changes happening with how people utilize office space. Yes, there is companies that are shrinking 50% sometimes, 20% sometimes. But really, when you take a step back and you peel the onion back, the typical tenant over the past couple of years has only really reduced between 10 to 20% of their footprint with all of these changes. And that's not because of the pandemic. That was happening before the pandemic because technology, AI, all of the stuff that's happening has created more efficiencies in how people connect and work. And so we're getting more efficient. So if you just take the average 15% reduction, that's about 120 million square feet of space that would be giving back. And that's only 1.5% of the overall US market. Now it doesn't sound that bad, right? We just went from thoughts of 800 million square feet of space vacating to 1.5%, right? So overall, take that into context. Worst case scenario, we might have 3 to 4% given back. Best case scenario, we have none to 1.5%. So I believe that office space surely is the headline story. It all impacts us. There's emotional connection to it, but there's not necessarily as much negative as what it seems, and especially when you look at our vacancy rate, it's sitting fairly stable for the past couple years. It's not drastic changes. It's just there's a lot of changes going on in how we utilize office space. Now, the big challenge, yes, is office investments, just like multifamily investments and all of the other investments, with that same cost of capital, with the same uncertainty of exactly how this all kind of plays out with office space and just the kind of generalized fear. We have obviously seen a significant drop in transactions. So for office investments in the city of Houston or in the market, it's about a 19% drop in total number of transactions year over year. Sounds kind of deep, but it's not as bad when you compare it against the overall US 37% drop in transactions. So Houston continues to perform better in terms of number of transactions happening in the market. And overall, just from a cap rate standpoint, very similar trends happening with office space as the other ones. Shifting over to industrial. Industrial has always been kind of that bright, shiny star for the past few years. It got a massive jolt of energy. We delivered more space. We've recorded the record absorptions. We've had more tenant activity than we've ever had. That's been the highlight from 21 into 22. And then you got 23, which, again, very positive, but it has shown softening, right? So instead of having 30-something million square feet of a positive absorption that we had in 21 and 22, we had 17 million square feet. And again, context. If you hear 17 million from 30 million, you go, oh my gosh, that's half almost. Well, the reality is pre-pandemic, before that jolt that happened by everybody wanting to shop online and get their products instantly, the average absorption that we would have in this market was anywhere from 5 million to 15 million square feet of positive absorption on a yearly basis. So we're at 17 million, far above what the averages are pre all of this craziness. So yes, there's softening. Yes, there's some slowing that we're seeing into there. That's not always a bad thing. It is just a kind of more normalizing of getting past the craziness that we've experienced in 21 and 22 and getting into a position that just makes a little bit more sense in terms of where we probably should be for the industrial market. Shifting to industrial absorption, same kind of topic, but this one I'm looking at it from a leasing activity standpoint. I'm not going to get into education of the difference between absorption and leasing activity, but just real quick on leasing activity, which is deals that were signed and not necessarily worrying about who moved in and who moved out. In 2023, we had, roughly speaking, over on this side, we had roughly speaking 37 million square feet of tenants that signed new leases in the greater Houston area for industrial. When you kind of break that down and look at it on a year basis on size, normally we were a little bit smaller back to 2020. More activity was happening on deals under 100,000 square feet. You started to see the shift in 21. We had 54% were under 100,000 square foot deals, 46% over. Then we shifted to 22, 48, and 52. And then funny enough, even though the square footages of what was signed is different, we mirrored the percentages in terms of deals over 100,000 square feet and under 100,000 square feet, with 18 million being over and then 19 million. Interestingly, just from a context, if you were to take that same number and look at it as a percentage of transactions, only 3% of the transactions were deals over 100,000 square feet. So yes, from a square footage standpoint, the bigger deals are obviously going to gobble up the majority of the square footage, but it was only 3% of the transactions were over 100,000 square feet. So our average deal size here in Houston is roughly 17,000 when you look at any deal that has happened in the market, from the small flex deals all the way up to the big industrial deals. So it's just an interesting look. We made 2020, by the way, small. We don't want to think about 2020 more, so it's kind of like pushing it off the slide there. You'll never see it again. But it's a good little analogy to compare against where we're at. Where's the activity happening? There's two ways that I look at activity. Either one, you can just strictly look at what was the total absorption, and then the other way that I try to look at it is, again, context. If you take the submarket, and if I were to say Northwest was 5.5 million square feet of absorption, well, yeah, it's a bigger submarket. There's more square footage in that area than some of the other submarkets. So if you break it down and look at it from a percentage of that submarket's inventory, and then you kind of look at where some of the activity is going. It tells not necessarily a different story completely, but it gives you more context to where that activity is in relation to the size of that market. So interestingly, even though there's more square footage absorbed in Northwest, the South market actually was the majority from a percentage of its turn inventory was higher than the rest of them. Southeast at 2.9, Southwest at 2.8. So it gives you a different perspective in terms of where the activity is. You've got absorption, which is just sheerly number, and then a percentage based off of what's in that market as well. So activity's happening. The port's been on fire. There's obviously a ton of activity on the north side and northwest side, but everybody will have these slides so you can kind of compare against what each of those submarkets are. Industrial activity, very similar to what I've been talking about with the rest of them. We've seen transaction volume has obviously dropped. For Houston, 30% drop in transactions. Overall, US, 31%. So we're mirroring essentially what's going on across the country in terms of total number of transactions. And same thing, median price per square foot going up still. And then same thing on the cap rate is also going up. On the last property type that I'm going to talk about is healthcare. And this is another bright and shining star in terms of like retail. Healthcare, for us in Houston, ranked number 1 in terms of the top 50 healthcare markets for both new construction and positive net absorption across the country. So healthcare continues to grow. That obviously has a lot to do with population growth. We continue to invest and develop more medical, more healthcare properties. Vacancy, as you can see, 100% basis drop that we had over the year over year. Net absorption, 1.7 million square feet of healthcare product that was absorbed. And then the only kind of curveball a little bit is average asking rental rates actually dropped. Now, I always kind of give caveats to rental rates. Rental rates are only based off of the power of how many people are willing to tell their rental rates, right? So like some people don't market it, some people lie about what maybe the rental rates are when they're asking for stats. But overall, super healthy healthcare market, and there's been a lot of growth that has happened. You've seen all of the pop-up, local hospitals right within your local communities, and the growth that continues to happen on healthcare. Kind of starting to wrap up. We got 2 more slides, and then we'll go hit the drinks together because we're going to need it after this slide. So debt markets, what's going on essentially with interest rates? What's going on with the whole topic that we continue to hear, which is potential delinquencies or potential opportunities for distressed properties? This is very big picture. This is from Real Capital Analytics. This is just a quick overview of the different property types. The fully shaded in is current kind of distressed state today. And then the dashed bar graphs there, that's your potential distressed, right? So obviously, apartments has probably been the leading talk that continues to be talked about across the country, with a massive nearly $70 billion worth of potential distressed assets that could be hitting the market. Doesn't mean it's all going to hit the market. So we actually reached out to Real Capital Analytics. I'll read this to you because it's kind of interesting. From 2019 to 23, of all of the properties that they classified as potentially distressed, 35% of them subsequently became classified as distressed. And then of that 35%, more than 60% of that 35% moved from potential to full-blown distressed within 12 months. And then within 24 months, 85% of that 35% had progressed. So what that tells you is there's a wave coming potentially, right? I mean, there is no doubt about that. There is challenges that are for all of the asset types. When you bought a property a couple of years ago at the interest rate market that we were at to where it's at today, there's going to be decisions that owners are going to have to face, and they're not going to be fun ones unless buyers start to come. And so the only hope, interest rates start to come down, maybe we get that gap coming a little bit more together, and then obviously that changes the dynamics. And then to wrap it up, the last one, we've done this little market cycle. I absolutely love this. We kind of tweaked it a little bit this year, so I'll start kind of bottom going up. So retail, talked about it being on fire. It's still an expansion phase. It's in a good place. It continues to grow. Office, poor office, I've kind of kept in this, so it's still in the recessionary kind of feeling. But I would almost argue that we could start to move that over to the left side because there is some positive that we've talked about obviously today around office space here. So it could be starting to get more back into that recovery phase, but it's still got a lot of challenges just based on everything that we've been experiencing. Multifamily, we had that over on the expansion side last year. We've shifted that bad boy over to the right side. There's a little bit oversupply. There's obviously a lot of stuff coming into the market. Healthcare, keeping that really at the peak. It's still running really well. And industrial, we did have an expansion, but there has been obviously some pausing in construction. There's been pausing by developers just to see what kind of things work out. It's not a pulling out of the market. It is merely a wait and see. Let's get through this cycle. Let's go ahead and absorb some of the product that we've got out there, and obviously enable us to continue to move forward. So with all of that being said, it's time for drinks. Now, but no, seriously, I think I do want to, we'll do claps in a minute. It makes me feel really good. But I do really want to say thank you all for coming out. We went a little bit longer, but I hope that the overall content and everything that you got from Edwin with artificial intelligence to everything that's going on obviously here in Houston, I would be absolutely remiss again to not thank Chrissy, Martha, Crystal, and our entire marketing team. Let's give them a round of applause. A bunch of work goes into this, and so we really, truly thank you for everything that you all have done on this. And to all of you, I look forward to working with you all. I look forward to getting to know each and every one of you. To our clients in the room that we work with today, thank you, obviously, for the opportunity to work with you. For those that aren't our clients today, we have listing agreements, commission agreements. We'll sign them today. And with that, we're a wrap. Let's go have some drinks. Thank you all.